Hi guys, it's Sarah Todd. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking all about some misconceptions regarding paralysis. Now, if you don't know me, let me just briefly share my story with you all. I became paralyzed from the neck down in 2010 when I was 8 years old due to a rare disorder called acute flaccid myelitis, or AFM. Obviously, since then, a whole decade later, I've recovered a lot. I am able to walk again, but I still have paralysis in areas of my arms and hands. So what this means for me is that I can't move my left hand. My right hand is very weak, although I can move it. I can't really lift my arms up past my shoulder, so about here. And there are other muscles in my arms and hands that I can't move. So I have a very spotty paralysis pattern, and this is totally not something you see very often, but yeah, my paralysis pattern is very unusual and unique, which causes a lot of people to not completely understand why my disability is this way, and that makes them believe in some misconceptions that I would love to debunk for you guys. So let's just get right on into the video. The first misconception that I see a lot of people believing in is that you can't have sensation if you are paralyzed. Now, I feel like typically that is the case. It seems like most people who have paralysis also don't have sensation in those areas, but that's not always true. Some people do have sensation in areas that are paralyzed, and then they don't have sensation in other areas that are paralyzed. But for me, I have full sensation. Now, this is really unusual, so I completely understand people being confused by this, but the reason that I do have full sensation is because sensation is actually controlled by a whole separate part of the spinal cord, completely different from the part that controls movement. So if you don't have damage to that area of your spinal cord, then you're not going to have any sensation issues, which is really fascinating to me, actually. But yeah, I do have sensation. I can feel temperature, pressure, pain, any kind of sensation. So I'm not any different in that way. I am a little more sensitive to hot and cold. So if I'm outside in freezing weather, my feet do actually go numb, like very fast, which is not typical of most people who don't have spinal cord injuries. And when I'm out in very hot weather, I heat up much faster than most people do. So that is one unusual temperature thing that I have. But other than that, I do have full sensation, and it is completely normal. The second misconception that I see a lot of people believing in is that you can't have paralysis in just your arms and hands. A lot of people don't see how you can have the ability to walk, but you can't move areas of your arms and hands. I know it is really unusual, but the reason that I have this paralysis pattern is because my injury is a lower motor neuron injury, and when your lower motor neurons are damaged, the specific muscles that those neurons innervate are damaged. So it's not like all of the lower motor neurons in all areas of my arms are damaged. It's just specific lower motor neurons in specific areas of my arms and hands, which is why only those specific areas of my arms and hands are paralyzed, which is so weird. And that subject is very complicated and complex, but if you are interested in learning more about the medical side of my disability, you should check out this video up at the top for you guys. I go more in depth on the whole lower motor neuron thing, so check that out if that interests you. But yeah, a lot of people just don't seem to be able to grasp that you can have paralysis in just your arms and hands. It doesn't have to be in your legs also for it to be in your arms and hands. Misconception number 3. This one I have to explain all the time, and I get why it's confusing, but it is frustrating having to explain this a lot. And that is, people think that for you to be considered paralyzed, that whole limb has to be paralyzed, which isn't true. So I still have paralysis in my left arm, even though I can move parts of my left arm. I can't move my arm from like the forearm down. I can't really move my tricep and bicep completely, and I can't move my shoulder. This is as high as I can lift my arm. So that confuses people because they see me moving my arm and they're like, oh, you don't have arm paralysis. But I do. It's just not throughout the whole limb. It's technically partial paralysis because it's not in every single muscle in my left arm, but it is still paralysis. It is still paralyzed. Same goes with my right arm. Even though I can move it, I can't move all parts of it, so it is still considered paralyzed. I do say I have partial paralysis sometimes just to try to clear it up for people and have it make more sense to them, but this one still heavily confuses people, and I get why, because my paralysis pattern is just so unique. But yeah, I do have to explain that one to people a lot. The fourth misconception that I see a ton is people think that if you're paralyzed, those limbs or those areas of your limbs won't move around at all while you're moving, if that makes sense. So, for example, people think that when I'm jumping up and down, my left hand isn't going to move because I can't move it, which doesn't make any sense at all. Obviously, if I jump up and down, my left hand is going to flop around because my body's moving. It can't just like stay stiff. Same goes for people who have paralysis in only their legs. People think that if they're moving their upper body or shimmying their body to like get into a seat or something, that their legs aren't going to move around and they're just going to stay still. This is incorrect because obviously when you move part of your body, just because you can't move another part of your body doesn't mean it's not going to move with your body. When we move one part of our body, oftentimes another part of our body moves. The way I like to explain this to people is I ask them to think about skydiving. Imagine if you're going skydiving, your limbs are going to flail around because your body is moving. Just because you're not trying to move your left arm or your right leg doesn't mean that it's not going to move. And this is because there is force acting on your body, causing it to move, which causes other parts of your body to move. So that's how I want people to think about it so that they can better grasp why paralyzed limbs and areas of limbs still move when people with paralysis move our bodies. The fifth and final misconception that I want to point out is that people often don't realize that having paralysis typically results in muscle atrophy. So for me, since I have paralysis in areas of my arms and hands, those areas of my arms and hands are significantly thinner than they would be if I didn't have paralysis there. This is because when you have paralysis, you can't move that muscle, so that muscle isn't going to get any exercise, so its muscle tone is just going to go down. This actually happens pretty quickly. My muscle atrophy set in pretty soon after I became disabled in 2010, and it's been there ever since. It was especially bad for about the first 2 years after I became disabled, and it's gotten a little bit better because I have learned how to do some things on my own, so I'm using the muscles that I have a little more than I was back then because I'm more independent now than I was then, but it's still pretty severe. As I'm sure you all have noticed, my arms are quite thin, and yes, that is because of my disability. Other people with paralysis will often also have muscle atrophy, so this is why when you see someone who has paralysis, their limbs where they have that paralysis will usually look thinner. And this is a hard aspect of having paralysis to deal with because I do sometimes get a little self-conscious about how thin my arms look. It's just my arms are really thin because there's like hardly any muscle in them. But yeah, I think that having muscle atrophy can make it a little bit harder for people with paralysis or other conditions that cause muscle atrophy to be confident. I don't always like showing my shoulders because they're so skinny, but I have gotten a little bit better at that. I don't mind showing my arms as much now. I used to care more a few years ago, but yeah, it doesn't bother me as much now. But I do think that having muscle atrophy does make it a little harder to be confident because it's easy to be self-conscious about being really thin, and people often will point out how thin I and other people with muscle atrophy are, which is just not kind. So I wish people understood that whole muscle atrophy bit a little bit more. So yeah, these are my top 5 misconceptions that I see people have about paralysis. I hope you found this video interesting and maybe even learned something. If you did, please let me know in the comments. I love hearing from you guys, so please be sure to leave me a comment in the comment section down below with your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, leave me a comment, hit that subscribe button, and remember to hit that notification bell so you never miss a video of mine. I post new videos every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern and sometimes Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. So I hope to see you at the next one. Bye!